China's top legislature has clarified that a Hong Kong court overstepped its bounds after it ruled on the constitutionality of an anti-mask law in Hong Kong. What's the real underlying issue here? Meanwhile, the Trump administration has once again extended a waiver that allows U.S. companies to sell components to Huawei. Will the blacklisting of the Chinese telecom giant continue for as long as the trade war does? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. It has been an eventful day in Hong Kong. China's central government responded swiftly to a Hong Kong High Court ruling that the anti-mask law enacted by the Hong Kong SAR government in October was unconstitutional. The Legislative Affairs Commission of China's top legislature, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, or NPCSC, said in a statement on Tuesday that such matters can only be judged and decided by the NPC Standing Committee, and no other organ has the right to judge or decide. Also on the same day, China's State Council appointed a new police chief in Hong Kong who started his tenure by supervising an operation to peacefully end the standoff between police and rioters inside the Polytechnic University. To help make sense of all of these developments, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Rick Dunham, co-director of the Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University, and Qu Qiang, assistant director of the International Monetary Institute of the Renmin University of China. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. So it's indeed a very important day because this is only the sixth time in history that the National Committee of the Chinese people, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress stepped in to help interpret the law in Hong Kong, and this only happens when there is very important issue, when there is a big controversy that the region itself cannot resolve, and it's when this National People's Congress Standing Committee step in to interpret the law. How do you look at this move? Basically, what the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress is saying, look, this High Court in Hong Kong did something which is not under its power, that it overstepped its bound, that it shouldn't have done that. Qu Qiang, how do you look at the severity of this matter?
I think this matter is rather severe because usually we all know that the legislators, like the Congress in America or the House of Representatives in the UK, they are legislators, so they went through all the process of the lawmaking. So therefore, I think we have a solid assumption that they do have the rights to interpret the law as it is. And as the judges, I think one of their job is to follow the law and using the existing laws to make the judgment on what has been done. So this is their sole job. And I think they overstepped it because they tried to explain the law from another angle, which means they tried to offer another explanation to the law according to their favorites. So I think this can be a serious situation.
So basically, I understand that this is actually what is problematic with the understanding of the one country, two systems on the minds of many in Hong Kong. Basically, they're saying, look, Hong Kong has a high degree of autonomy and it has some kind of a balance of power between the judiciary, the legislative and the administrative, although it is supposed to be led by the administrative. Therefore, it kind of treats the judicial system as somewhat of an independent organ separate from the administration, and yet let us not forget the SAR government is part of China, so it doesn't have its final say in whether a law is constitutional or not.
What's clear is this is an existential question of judicial independence in Hong Kong. It hasn't reached, I mean, we haven't reached this point since Hong Kong returned to China, and if this is overturned, if the Supreme Court ruling in Hong Kong is overturned, it means that the rulings of the court system in Hong Kong are subject to, any ruling is subject to review, and the interpretations that the courts in Hong Kong have of the rights of people in Hong Kong are subject to review in the mainland. It really will open up questions in the minds of the judges of what they use as the supreme law of the land. And it was intentionally complicated at the time that Deng Xiaoping and Margaret Thatcher reached their agreement on what would happen in Hong Kong with one country, two systems. And it's slowly been defined, as you said, by these 6 rulings from Beijing. This is a major step, and the question is, what comes next?
Well, basically, a lot of people have the misunderstanding that the Constitution of Hong Kong is the basic law,
right,
which is wrong, because the Constitution of Hong Kong is not just the basic law of Hong Kong. It is also the Constitution of China. So in that case, and Hong Kong being an administrative region of China, obviously it doesn't have the power to judge on whether something is constitutional or not. It's just like a state.
That's correct.
Court.
States in the United States have constitutions, but if the constitutions are in conflict with the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Constitution takes precedence.
If a law is
violates the federal Constitution.
So who has the power to decide the constitutionality?
The U.S. Supreme Court does.
The U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
So
this would be the equivalent of a state Supreme Court in America deciding something, and then, although this is not the U.S. Supreme Court, this is the government. This is like Donald Trump saying that the state court ruling is not justified. But this is where the systems are different. The Chinese system is different than the American system.
Right. Well, even there is a one country, two systems, it never gave the region of Hong Kong the right to decide whether any local law is constitutional or not.
Oh, yes,
and I think that's the problem here.
Yes, I think there's a huge misunderstanding in here. That is, first of all, China and Hong Kong is not a federal relation. It's not like Hong Kong is just one federal state of China. No, we're not like that. We're central government and the local city government, that kind of relation. Of course, or if we just put in the shoes in America, let's say Hong Kong's like California, and we have a federal government like a Chinese federal government like this. Just imagination. Sometimes local state can just rule against the federals. For example, California set up asylum cities to protect the illegal immigrants of the Mexicans. But that is out of two background and two core principles. First of all, the judges must be pure American, the patriot. They love America. They have a pure life stake in America. And secondly, the ruling against the federal law is not against the whole interest of America as a whole. Say, not separating America, not try to damage the sovereignty of America. But these two rules and two principles are all against it in Hong Kong. First of all, the judges are not Hong Kong local people. They're not permanent residents. They're from UK. And secondly, their ruling against the central government is not binding to the interest of Chinese government and Chinese people. They're trying to separate Hong Kong or help the separatists. So that is against the basic principle.
Well, I'm not sure in this case. Of course, a lot of people have raised the question of the nationality of the judges in Hong Kong, and I was talking to some people in Hong Kong. They acknowledge the problem, but they say if you strip all of the foreign judges of their job from Hong Kong, there will not be simply enough legal personnel to staff all of the courts and all of the judicial organs. So that is one thing. And secondly, although some judges in Hong Kong are foreign nationals, not all of them are biased. We have to say some of them, and especially, and we have heard interviews of some previous judges, for instance, they are taking a very righteous stance on this issue. And not all Chinese judges are also pro-China. We have actually found out that the judges who did this ruling actually Hong Kong nationals, Chinese nationals, but they unfortunately have taken the side, as we see it, of, the protesters. So actually, I think I'm driving at the notion that basically the judicial sovereignty of Hong Kong has never come back to China after the handover.
Right. It was an open question. I mean, the political sovereignty question was answered very quickly. Beijing was going to name and was going to choose the people who could be chosen eventually to lead Hong Kong. Judicial questions were not really answered. This is the first major clue that the world has seen on the direction of the future of where the judicial system is going in Hong Kong.
So, well, this is a very big question, and of course we won't know what will be done, whether these opinions from the National Committee, from the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress will be observed in a certain way in Hong Kong. But I guess this is not a suggestion. I guess they are pointing out that this is not the right way to go forward. How do you look at the way that the police has been handling the standoff in the Polytechnic University campus. I mean, 600 people so far have surrendered peacefully, but still, as we were preparing for the show earlier today, about 100 people still trapped in the university campus.
It's a very tough situation. I mean, you can't let rioting go unchecked. At the same time, I mean, I do believe, even though some in China would disagree with me, the question of a proportionate response is a legitimate question. The police have to respond in proportion to the violence, and so that's the balancing act right now that the new police chief has to have. And I think I think at least it hasn't spiraled further out of control over the past day. And let's just hope that there's a way to safely and peacefully diffuse this.
But from what you have seen, do you think the police have overstepped their bounds again in the level of response that they did?
It's all individual cases, and I think there are times when you could second guess the police, and there are times when the response is absolutely proportionate, when there have been violent acts and acts aimed at the police.
Yeah, Xu Qiang, your observation of the situation.
Well, this is probably not described in any given laws to say how appropriate is the action should be given. But from the observation from both sides, from the protesters or from the police side, the video they show up, I think the fact is rather obvious. The protesters actually overstepped. They're using the Molotovs, they're using the catapults, they're using the crossbows, and the police are using just a standard equipment like the rubber bullet and the tear gas, and that's it. I think this is just a standard operation from any country. In the Catalonian situation and New York situation, I don't think any police in any region in the country are using a lower level of the controlling method than Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong police is rather restrained. And they keep on talking and negotiating and just to try to convince them first. And then what they get back is the Molotov and the catapult. Actually, so I think they're rather doing their job.
Actually, there are a lot of people who are complaining that the police have been too soft.
Yes.
That the police have been too restrained. Therefore, there is no deterrence for the rioters that they continue to do exactly. So what do you think it has led the situation so far, Rick? From an educator's point of view, you know, these students and these black hat rioters, some of them older, some of them are said not to be students, but many of them are also very, very young. For instance, there were 200 who were under 18. Of course, they were able to leave the campus without being arrested once they surrender. But just the sheer amount of underage children, when you are under 18, your children present in this standoff. What is your take?
Well, I do think that there is a lot of anger among young people in Hong Kong, and that young ranges from teenagers through the 20s. I mean, but to me, it's irrelevant the age if there's violence, and the question is how you stem the violence. But it's a very difficult situation because I don't see the end game, and it challenges the leadership of the police and of the government how you deal with it. I do believe that this is not primarily students. It happens to be on college campuses, but I believe that that's just the battleground right now. I don't think that it's a question of students versus the police. I mean, some are students, but I don't think it's a student uprising. I think it's part of the general situation in Hong Kong.
That's the view of some, but there are other people who argue that the students have been condoned, have been tolerated in, for instance, they were practicing throwing petrol bomb in the swimming pool of the school. They were building petrol bombs in the school campus, and all of this had been allowed to go on, you know, before things came to this point. But anyway, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Rick Dunham from Tsinghua University and Xu Qiang from Renmin University of China.